Welcome back to the Strong Opinion Hibs podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jack, and today I'm joined by Charlie. Unfortunately, no Calvin again. It's busy time for Calvin with all the exams coming back for getting marked and everything like that as well. So just myself and Charlie again. And how are you, Charlie?
I'm good, mate. Strange being another week with Hibs, but I'm doing all right, mate. How are you?
A bit of a hectic one for me, obviously. Had a job interview last week. Fingers crossed it's good news. I think it went well. And obviously, I got my magazine through. I got my article published again. So it's been a bit of a hectic week for me, but a good one. But missing the Hibs. It's weird the first sort of full week without any football that you're properly invested in. First weekend, we not obviously had the Champions League, but I don't really support any of the teams that were in that. So yeah, it's been weird not having Hibs or Hertha to make me cry. So yeah, but it's good to be on talk with Hibs. So obviously, last week we did the women's season review, got very well received. So thank you to everybody for all your positive comments on that and everything. I think it went down really well, and we'll be doing even more on the women's team next season, which will be an exciting season. And now it's the season review that's going to be the less positive one, which is the men's season reviews. We go through the car crash that was the 2021-22 season for us. So like we did with the women's review, we'll start off with the stats. And the first competition that we're going to go through is the Europa Conference League. So, of course, securing third last season meant that we were going to enter into the qualifiers for the brand new Europa Conference League, the inaugural Europa Conference League, which is sort of like the modern Intertoto Cup, if you like. Obviously, a third tier European competition that UEFA set up new for this season. So we went in at the second qualifying round, and our first opponents were Santa Coloma. Insert joke about that Christmas song here. The first opponents were Santa Coloma. So obviously we played them at Easter Road. That was the first game with fans. Our first competitive game with fans since lockdown. So that was pretty exciting. Played them at Easter Road, got a 3-0 win at Easter Road. And then we won 2-1 after going 1-0 down in Andorra. So that was that. So pretty expected, to be honest, playing an Andorran team. I think they came third in Andorra and had won the Andorran Cup. You're playing a team from one of the sort of bottom 5 European countries. You're expecting a win. You know, they're all semi-professional, the teams. You're expecting a confident win, and that's what we got. Oh, it did get a bit ropey out in Andorra, to say the least, after, you know, all sorts of problems as well with the live stream, the Andorran FA. Obviously, the cables weren't working, or they're struggling to pick up signal with all those mountains. I think that's the excuse. They should have used the Pyrenees were struggling to pick up signal in the Pyrenees. They could have used that excuse. But anyway, yeah, that was an interesting experience watching the Andorran FA YouTube channel. I think we've probably got more subscribers than them. Yeah, that was certainly an interesting experience. But obviously, we got through that 5-2 5-1 on aggregate, which was to be expected, to be honest. I mean, you should be beating teams like that confidently. And then we were drawn against Croatian Cup winners Rijeka in the next qualifying round, the third qualifying round. That was obviously going to be a bit more of a challenge. Rijeka have had good records against Scottish teams in the past. Obviously, put Aberdeen out a few years ago, and they are a very well-established side in Croatia. Croatia's a league that I'd say is, you know, either just about on par or just slightly below the SPFL. So obviously playing a more sort of, I'd like to say, established opponent was always going to be difficult for us. Game at Easter Road was 1-1. We dominated them in that game, just didn't take our chances. They go 1-0 up, and then we get the equaliser. And we had a few chances after that. Obviously, Dan Mackay with a gilt-edged chance, if anybody remembers that game. If Dan Mackay had scored that, possibly a very different complexion to the fixture. And then obviously we go out to Croatia and get spanked 4-1. Darren McGregor gets sent off. Doige got that injury that I think basically spelt the end of Doige's season, because even after he came back, he just looked a mile off of it. So all in all, I think the Conference League for me, and I'll get your thoughts in a minute, Charlie, it was very disappointing. You know, this was rigged effectively for us to get to the group stage. I mean, Aberdeen got to the playoff round when they lost to Qarabag. So this was basically rigged for us to get to the playoff round. We were realistically 3 rounds of qualifying away from Europe. I think Rijeka were a beatable team. Had we have gotten the playoff round, we would have been seeded again because of our league position. which meant we would have got an easier opponent in the playoff round. So we would have avoided the likes of Tottenham and Union Berlin and like the top 5 league teams. And we would have been talking about European group stage football very realistically. So I think we missed a huge chance. And then the thing that makes it worse is Lincoln Red Imps from Gibraltar went and qualified, and we didn't. So I think questions have got to be asked about that. I think our game management was quite poor at Easter Road. I think, in terms of the chances, if we'd taken those chances, it would have been a completely different tie. Of course, no away goals. So the Akers goal wouldn't have really mattered. I think having a lead to take over to Croatia would have helped us more. And I think that game against Rijeka, which still stands as our heaviest defeat this season, which is a miracle if you think about how badly we've played. At times, I think if you look at it, if we'd taken the lead over to Croatia, it could have been a completely different game. And then we would have got an easier opponent in the playoff round. Because I think we could have beaten the likes of Qarabag or some of these Slovenian teams and Moldovan teams that were in the playoff round. So I definitely think even Rovaniemi from Finland, we could have beaten them. And I think it's just hugely disappointing. It was a big chance at European group stage football, and we missed out on it. So yeah, overall, I think the Conference League qualifying campaign, all 4 games of it, all 2 rounds of it, has got to go down as quite disappointing. I think it was maybe a sign of things to come. What are your thoughts, Charlie?
It was a bit embarrassing, really. Finish third and then get popped out of a Croatian side. Like it's no ideal, is it? That was probably where there was questions over the team going into the season. Obviously, Jack Ross was still looking for a defender and a striker at this point, but I think that was when it was really starting to show that, okay, we're going to be in for a long season, I think. You're right. I think the game against Rijeka at home, we should have battered them. The game against Santa Coloma, we won 3-0, but I didn't think we were that great. I think, it's obviously nice to get through a round, but I don't think we were that great at all.
Yeah, I've got to agree. I think, especially when we went out there, we were very close to them actually putting us out. If you think about it, if they'd got another goal, I think it would have genuinely became quite, ropey, and it could have been one of those situations where we effectively Hibs it, And I think as you compare it to the run in the qualifying we had the last time we were in it with Lenny and that team, obviously we smashed Runevic. I've got to remember, actually Faroe Islands are a higher standard than the Andorran League. I think they're about 2 or 3 places higher in the coefficients. So we smashed Runevic, who are one of the better teams in the Faroe Islands as well. We then beat a decent Asteris Tripolis side, because I think Greek football, I'd arguably, is better than Croatian football. Beat a good Asteris Tripolis side, in a big comeback victory. And then when you go play Molde, obviously, I think it was similar to the Rijeka game, where we could have realistically beaten Molde at Easter Road, and then we sort of messed it up out in Norway. But that was a good Molde team. And we look at what 2 figures from that team went on to do. Erling Haaland, I mean, look at it. He's just been transferred to Man City after ripping up the Bundesliga, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's managed Manchester United. So I think when you look at that I think the way that losing that Molde team compared to losing that Rijeka team, I've got to say, if you compare those 2 runs, I definitely think the run back then was a hell of a lot better, and it was just that was a lot more of a positive run as well, because we played good football. We absolutely brushed us. I mean, we got double figures on aggregate against Runevic, which was what we should have been doing against Coloma, because I agree with you, mate. At Easter Road, we won 3-0, but to be honest, it wasn't a convincing performance at all. They were at times the better team in the game. You could see it. If they weren't a semi-professional team, because you've seen it, like when we were standing outside after, you could see players, their striker was having a fag outside the stadium after it. If they weren't semi-professional players, I definitely think Santa Coloma could have genuinely caused us a few more problems than they did. So I think overall, yeah, I've got to agree with you, mate. It's embarrassing, it's disappointing, and it's a big chance missed. And then obviously when we talk about the league, we had a big chance missed for Europe this season as well. I mean, and again, it feeds into the cup. I think all European things like so annoying, because if we'd won the cup last season, we would have been guaranteed group stage football either way. Because if you lose in the Europa League playoff round, which is what we would have been entered into if we'd won the cup, we would have went into the Conference League group stage automatically. So I think big chance missed with Europe, if you ask me. And overall, it was really, really disappointing. So we'll now move on to the Premier Sports Cup. So obviously, while we're runners up in that, our run started off against Kilmarnock. So obviously, we played Kilmarnock at home. We missed out on the group stage. We got a bye from the group stage this season. So played Kilmarnock at home, beat them 2-0. I think standard performance to be expected against Championship Kilmarnock, who fair enough had a good season in the Championship, but I think no the best Killie side that we've ever played, and we got an expected win against them. Went up to Tannadice after that in the quarter-final for a 3-1 win against Dundee United. I think that's been arguably one of our best performances this season against Dundee United up at Tannadice. For me, I know the second half was a bit more sort of tense, but I think the first half was one of our best performances this season. Semi-final, we played Rangers, or should I say the Rangers, and kept up a tradition of absolutely pumping them at Hampden. 3-1. I think that was amazing because we were stuck in quite a rut at that point. Obviously, this was sort of the beginning of the end of Jack Ross, that sort of run. And I come up against a Rangers side that, yes, they were managerless, but still a very impressive. You've got to remember, Rangers were still in realistic contention for the league title at that point. It was properly tight. I think Rangers were actually possibly top of the league when we went into the semi-final. Or they might have, I think they might have been. I don't know, I can't remember. But either way, Rangers were still doing very well. And you've got to remember like what that Rangers team went on to do. They won the Scottish Cup, they got to the Europa League final, and one of the worst Hibs teams in a while, still papped them at Hampden. So I think that was amazing. And obviously we get to the final against, again, a very, very good Celtic side. And we go 1-0 up. Charlie's favourite player scoring that goal, Mr. Paul Hanlon. And the euphoria lasted all of about, it was seconds. And then Kyogo goes up the other end and scores. And then obviously we end up throwing it away. So I've got to say, for me, the League Cup, that's the bare minimum for me getting to the final of the League Cup. The League Cup is a competition I think not all non-Old Firm sides should be in to win, because Old Firm, view it as a Diddy Cup. They don't really care about it. I think we've seen that in the past, and obviously it's a competition that we actually have a relatively good history in. We've won our first one in the 70s with an amazing Turnbull Tornado team. 91, the team that wouldn't die, and of course CIS Cup in 2007, that amazing team as well. So I think it's a cup we have a good record in and a good history in, and really finals a bare minimum for me. And I think it's massively disappointing, but considering we had a caretaker manager, I think it's not bad that we held that Celtic team to such a close. And I know people might say that's a losing mentality. Obviously, it's really disappointing we lost and you don't get anything. Runners-up medals don't mean anything. But I think considering the season we've had, beating that Rangers team was fantastic. And I think we didn't do overly badly in the final, considering what led up to it with Jack Ross getting the axe and David Gray. It's a big ask for an interim coach who's had no experience to step up and manage in a final. So I definitely think, for me, the League Cup was bare minimum. I think getting to the final League Cup, the bare minimum, but it was actually a good run. And you just, I wish that had been the final, though, that game against Rangers. And that sort of felt like the final as well. The final was so disappointing. And of course, there was a lot going on outside the football at that point about like COVID passports and were we going to go into another lockdown because the cases had spiked around Christmas. And the final just didn't feel like a final to me. Whilst the semi-final did, that felt like our final. So yeah, I think all in all, the League Cup was, it was all right. So what were your thoughts on the League Cup, Charlie?
Yeah, I think it was a good campaign, obviously, to get to the final, but it's still another final we've lost, isn't it?
Exactly.
I think that, beating Rangers in the semi, we sort of expect that every time we play them at Hampden, don't we, that we're going to beat them. All joking aside, I think it was probably our best performance this season to be 3-0 up inside half an hour. No one saw that coming. Can't remember the last time a player scored a hat-trick against Rangers. Probably a Celtic player. Doesn't happen that often. But I think, to get to the final, it's a decent season. It's probably the bare minimum, like you say, where we want to be. We want to be in at least one final a season. Personally, I don't care if it's the League Cup or the Scottish Cup. I want to be in a final in the season. So I think it's funny. I was unable to make that final because it's a Sunday and I work Sundays. And it was funny watching it in the pub. It's the first final I've ever, except the COVID one, obviously, first final I've ever been absolutely deflated afterwards when we've lost. Because the previous finals, Livingston, I was too young to know what it meant. In 2004, Hearts in 2012. Well, I didn't see the final whistle because I'd left. Celtic 2013, couldn't tell you because I'd left. Ross County, that was just crazy what happened. That in that last minute winner, and I think that in the St Johnstone one, it was crazy as well. But that was the first one I'd actually felt like, that's a chance missed. Because going 1-0 up, I don't think Celtic were that good that day. To be fair, they took other chances, but I think all in all, mate, like we had a good convincing win against Dundee United en route as well. I think that was the game that again, we'd never expected that to happen. So all in all, I think it was a good League Cup campaign. I don't think it was great because obviously we lost in the final, but I think it was good.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I think it was disappointing we lost, but it was a good run, especially that I keep bringing the semi-final back, but it's genuinely our best performance all season. It's as simple as that. The way we just ripped Rangers apart, and it showed you what we're capable of. That's the annoying thing, is if we just kept anywhere near that sort of level of attacking threat and how dangerous we were in that game, this season we would have been in Europe again. You could have been talking about at least top 6. So I think, yeah, it shows you what we're capable of as well. So overall, I think the League Cup's got to go down as, yeah, it was good. It was all right. It was all right. And we'll now move on to the second of the cup competitions. The Scottish Cup, obviously, only got as far as the semi-final. The Scottish Cup. So started off our Scottish Cup run with a very sort of, and this is going to sound funny, but a very disappointing win against Cove, having to take a part-time League One side to extra time and then scoring sort of right towards the end of extra time as well. I think it's not good enough, if you ask me. And people might say, I said at the time, yeah, all credit to Cove, they did play well, but and I think that was a sign of things to come with Maloney as well. I think genuinely that it wasn't good. I mean, we won. You left Easter Road going. I've actually left Easter Road being happier with draws and losses than I have with that game. Seriously, it was like, what the hell did I just watch? And I don't normally say this about the team. Anybody that knows me knows that I don't normally talk like this. But seriously, I think taking a League One side to extra time, and it's the winning that counts in the cup, but still you expect to be beating sides like Cove at least like in extra time and normal time. If we'd won 1-0 and over the 90 minutes, you would have been, okay, that's fine. Cove were determined, but we won. Taking them extra time and then for points in the game for them actually look quite dangerous. That wasn't good enough. I mean, like I said, it was a warning sign for what was coming with Maloney, to be honest, I think. And then obviously after that, we got dealt a very tough away tie against Arbroath. Arbroath go 1-0 up. But of course, who else but Craig White? I mean, the Jambos must have been creaming themselves when that happened. And then obviously we've got, we saved our blushes and we won 3-1. Chris Mueller's only goal in a Hibs shirt. And obviously Nisbet as well, getting what was quite a good goal in that game as well. So obviously beat Arbroath. And that was a potential banana skin avoided. It was actually, I know it was an all right performance. I wouldn't say it was exactly like set the world alight. I was very workmanlike, which is what you expect in those conditions against a team like Arbroath. That's what you're going to expect against that team, and we won. Then obviously we got our quarter-final tie against Motherwell. She's fine, thank you, at Fir Park. And that was again, a bit of an interesting one. Obviously, Bevis Mugabe got sent off not long into the game at all. Melkerson's first 2 goals in a Hibs shirt, and only 2 goals in a Hibs shirt to date. And I think, I think that was actually quite a good battling performance for me against Motherwell in that quarter-final. Obviously, I think that's, to be fair, that's probably one of the best performances we had under Maloney, to be honest, that Motherwell game. Very good first half, especially Melkerson's first goal was like a proper striker's goal as well. Very good first half, with a lot of good attacking threat. And then in the second half, we were just happy to sort of defend and because Motherwell are a very difficult side to deal with. and we managed just to sort of marshal them well, and we saw the win out. It was obviously Maloney got his first trip to Hampden as a club manager, and then we played Hearts, and obviously that was the second Edinburgh derby in a row, and we lost. Hearts go 2-0 up. We get a goal back. Second half, arguably we could have won it, and we had the chances to win it, but we didn't, and that was that. It was really disappointing, losing 2 derbies in a row. You really felt that we had something to prove in the Scottish Cup. For me, I think that was Maloney. Maloney could have redeemed himself, I think, if he'd won that derby and had got us to the final. Like, Maloney could have redeemed himself, and he would have saved his own job as well. And obviously that was it. That was the final straw for Ron Gordon and Ben Kinsella, and Maloney was relieved of his duties. So overall, I've got to say the Scottish Cup was just disappointing for me. You know, last season when we had the run, obviously it was bad losing to St Johnstone. But when we had that run, obviously we played some really good football. You know, we're beating some difficult sides like Queen of the South, Stranraer. You know, we were playing really good, attractive football, and we were beating these sides confidently, which is what you expect. And then obviously we got to the final. Unfortunately, we lost to St Johnstone the way we did. But I definitely think if you're comparing the cup runs, last season's was better. I've just got to say the last season was more exciting. This one was just deflating. We struggled past Cove. It was eye-bleeding stuff against Arbroath, to be honest, at times. Motherwell was okay. I think it was a performance you'd expect against Motherwell. Those are the sorts of wins we get against Motherwell. And then the way we lost that semi-final was just so heartbreaking, because genuinely, I think in the second half, we had enough to win it. And then, you know, that's what sent us into a bit of free fall after that. So, Charlie, would you agree that it was maybe a slightly disappointing cup campaign, even though we got to the semi-final?
I'd rather win out in the quarter-final, to be honest, mate. I never, ever want to lose to them at Hampden, or ever. So
exactly,
I'd much rather got beat off Motherwell in the quarter. And there's, I think just, it's all fine and well getting to these big games at Hampden, but if you're going to get beat, like, it doesn't happen for me, you know. It was a good chance to break that duck. Obviously, never beaten Hearts at Hampden, which pains me every day that we've never done that. But I think I'd have much rather go beat in the quarter-final, mate. Save yourself the embarrassment again of another derby defeat.
I think so.
But then again, on that, if we beat them, it's fine. But like, obviously, they get to go to the final and we get to laugh at them when they get beat, which is funny in itself. But I'd have much rather been beat in the quarters.
I think so. I would have honestly, my heart sank when we drew them in the semi, because I knew what was coming at that point because of that record we have against them at Hampden, and it was a big chance to put that behind us. And obviously, there was a lot of players, and obviously Maloney as well, that needed to prove themselves. We just been packed off them at Tynecastle after going 1-0 up. This was the chance. This was the chance to go, you know what, we're getting revenge, and it would have been the ultimate revenge, finally beating them at Hampden. And we don't, and I would have much rather we'd drawn one of the Old Firm in the semi and got pumped and then had been done with it. You know, seriously, because I think I agree with you. You never want to lose to them. You never want to lose to them anyway. But when it's on such a big stage, you just never, ever, ever want to lose to Hearts on such a big stage. And I think it just shows you that this team couldn't get up for big games apart from that League Cup semi. This team could not get up for big games at all. Because look at our record against the Old Firm, look at our record against Hearts this season. It's woeful, to be honest. So yeah, I definitely think that the Scottish Cup for me, if we'd been put out by that Motherwell team, you would have went, well, we've had a bit of a crappy season. That's disappointing. Oh well, move on. But losing to Hearts the way we did in that semi, just it's unacceptable, mate, if you ask me. And it just sums up the season as well. The fact that this is a squad that was just nowhere near good enough for what we needed to do, because last season was always going to be a sort of tough act to follow. And we just didn't have the players to follow that act, to be honest. So yeah, it didn't live up to it. And finally, we'll end our little competitions rundown with the Cinch Premiership. Obviously, I think this is probably the most disappointing element after the Scottish Cup of the season. Our final league position in the Cinch Premiership was 8th on 45 points, which sums up the season, doesn't it, Charlie? Sums up the season. Disappointing, really, really poor. it's not good enough as well. You know, from coming third last season, and sort of realistically looking at European football and getting to a cup final and having a really positive league campaign and having a positive season. You know, take the 2 defeats out to St Johnstone in the cups aside. We had a really positive season last season. To a really poor league campaign, and one in which that if we hadn't of beaten St Mirren, we would have realistically been looking at the playoffs. That could have been us playing Inverness last week there. So I think, yeah, it was shocking, utterly shocking league campaign. And we went through 2 managers as well over the course of the season, which is shocking as well. So I think obviously the league started off quite promising. We had a strong start. Then it all unravels at Ibrox. Obviously, we lose to Rangers after Poch just got that red card. It was never a red card. And we go on a horrible run after that. Jack Ross gets sacked. David Gray comes in as intern. Sean Maloney gets brought in. Sean Maloney starts off reasonably well. I'd say got that win against Aberdeen, got that win against Dundee United. We draw in the derby after quite a strong performance. And then after that, he goes on a horrible run of his own, which eventually ends in him getting sacked. David Gray comes in as intern. We're bottom 6, which was hugely disappointing. That was a massive kick to the guts, coming bottom 6, to be honest. I mean, it's just, for a club of our size, it's unacceptable, to be brutally honest. And then David Gray comes in and we win a grand total of 2 of the split games. I mean, we get beat by Dundee. We got relegated bottom of the league. So I think, to be honest, the league campaign was a shambles this season, to be honest. And after a strong start, like the way we start the league campaign, I thought, you know what? I don't think we're going to quite get third again. But I was expecting maybe 4th or 5th. At least we'll still get European football, we'll still be top 6. But it just all horribly unravelled. I think the league campaign was just massively frustrating, disappointing, unacceptable. And it proves how much it shows you how much the lack of ambition was in the part of the players, if you ask me. That we were accepting getting beat by teams like St Mirren, Livingston, Dundee. Only beating Dundee once this season thanks to a horrific own goal. Unacceptable. And there's the stats you've got to look at. Dundee, we couldn't beat them at home because we drew. No, we couldn't beat them away. Sorry, we only beat them at home. Couldn't beat them away. Couldn't beat that. We drew twice and then lost once, and then we beat them at home. And it wasn't even like that. Was really sort of dire stuff. St Mirren, we struggled against them this season because they beat us at Easter Road. And when we drew with them at Easter Road, we only beat them twice away. Livingston, we only got 1 win against them this season. St Johnstone is the only team we have a complete set of unbeaten results against, and we still couldn't even beat them all the times we played them. Played them at the worst, and we drew 0-0 with them. And I think that's when St Johnstone were in the right proper dip. We drew 0-0 with them at the football for a 5-er game. Dundee United had quite a shoddy record against them. Couldn't beat Hearts. Obviously, we got in the league, we got the 2 draws and then beat Celtic and Rangers. Didn't beat them this season. Rangers up in the league, beat us every time we played them. Which is, these are the sides you need to at least be taking points off of if you want to be challenging for European football, like a side of our size. Even that struggling Aberdeen team, we struggled against them this season. There's a cold hard fact that the league campaign is perhaps the most disappointing element of this season. You come in 8th, you're struggling against teams that you should be beating confidently, and we're sides like Motherwell and Ross County were coming above us in the league. It's just not on, if you ask me. Just not on. 8th, really disappointing, and it's one of the most disappointing seasons we've had since Butcher, if you ask me. Simple as that. Even the seasons in the Championship where we're getting at least we were like getting into the playoffs and everything. If you ask me, yeah, it was disappointing we lose the players, but at least we were playing good stuff and sort of competing at the top when we were in the Championship. And then when we come back, obviously we've got Lenny. We've come 4th. Lenny's obviously the half of that season. Then when Hecky came in, we came 6th or 5th, I think. Then Jack Ross comes in. Jack Ross, obviously, Jack Ross after Hecky turns it around because of the COVID on points per game were 7th. but when in reality we should have been sixth. Jack Ross's first full season, we come third. So this is, to me, the worst season since we've come up for the Championship. And yeah, it was just massively disappointing. I think I've run out of words to throw at it that aren't swear words, to be honest, about how disappointing and just utterly shocking the league campaign was. I mean, eight's just not good enough for a club of our size. It's as simple as that. A club of our size should be challenging for European football, fourth or third, or even try to split the old firm, to be honest. So, yeah, not good at all. So, Charlie, what were your thoughts on the league campaign, mate?
Nothing really to add except what you said, mate. There, I think would Jack Ross have got us bottom six? Probably not.
I don't think so.
I think I think Ron's maybe regretting that sacking now, seeing what happened at the end of the season. But look, mate, it's not acceptable. 3rd to 8th in a season with the possibility that we could have finished 10th. It's not good enough, mate. There's certain players in that team that have caused this. And we'll get to that later on when we do the tier maker. There's a lot of players that are going to be in that bottom category for me this season. Not one player stood up and fought for that badge when we needed it most. You know, going into the game at Tynecastle, we could have had top 6 wrapped up weeks and weeks before that. Yeah. The game against Dundee United was embarrassing. The game before Hearts, I don't know how many chances we had. I don't know how many times this season midfielders like Jake Doyle-Hayes, Joe Newell, Josh Campbell get to the edge of the box and pass backwards. It was just eye-bleeding football for all the season. Even the start of the season when we're beating Ross County 3-0 and we're beating Motherwell 3-2. More so the Motherwell one, there's still questions to be asked because we went from not conceding a goal in open play from a header, a cross last season before, to almost 95% of our goals this season. I've plucked that number out of thin air. It might not be the case, but to a high percentage of our goals being from crosses, there's so many things wrong in the playing squad, and you see that with an 8th place finish. And I'm glad to see the back of this season, to be honest, because it was just embarrassing.
Spot on, mate. Spot on. I think, yeah, it's as simple as that. Yeah, I agree. If Jack Ross had been allowed to sort of turn things around, I think we would have been at least like looking at 6th this season minimum, to be honest. And yeah, to me, the players are the problem. There was a lot of decisions made upstairs as well that I think caused a few issues there. But all in all, I think it was just really, really disappointing. The fact that you raised that 8th is actually getting off lightly, considering we could have finished 10th. So
probably should have finished 10th.
I think on the basis of it, I mean, like after we lost to Dundee, you're like, we have no right to be finishing any higher than we did, to be honest. So yeah, we'll now move on to. Don't worry, it does get better from here until we go into the Tiermaker. We're now going to move on to the stats. So first of all, we'll start off with the total goals scored. And the total goals scored this season across all competitions was 61. Now, if you compare that to the 93 that the women's team scored across all competitions, that tells you all you need to know about people dissing women's football. But yeah, total goals conceded was 56. Then our final win percent, and this may not surprise a lot of people, but I was quite shocked when I worked this out. Our final win percentage across all comps was 38%. That shows you how bad it really was this season. Like, there it is in a cold, hard number, 38%. Compare that to the women's team who had a win percentage of 54%. So the women were winning just over half of their games this season. The men's team were losing quite a lot. By that, you couldn't even manage average. You couldn't even manage half of your wins or below half of your wins. I think aside coming 4th or 3rd in the league, the magic number with a win percentage needs to be about high 40s or the 50s. So we were well off the mark. It's as simple as that. We were well beyond the mark. In terms of our final win percentage. So just before we move on to player stats, Charlie, what does that win percentage of 38% tell you?
Players are the problem. If the win percentage is 38%, it's not in that the 3 managers we've had. they're take part of the blame, but the players are the ones that are on the pitch, mate. Like, I know people blame Maloney, blame Ross, blame David Gray, but it's ultimately the players. Like, I know Maloney probably overtrained them and they had no idea what they were doing, but they still need to go out and perform on the park. Like, no beating teams at home that we would wipe the floor with last season. Like, going to Livingston, no winning away from home at Livingston. Did we beat them? We beat them once at home this season. Like, that's embarrassing. Like, that is embarrassing. And I know we took a bit of a slating on Twitter when I slated Omiyonga and whatever, but we need to be beating Livingston. We need to be beating St Mirren. We need to be beating Ross County every single time we play them. Like, there's a massive gulf in class between us and your St Mirrens, your Ross Counties, your Livingstons, even your Kilmarnocks, and like next season, we need to be taking 3 wins off them easily. Like, what? I just don't understand how they're beating us. I really don't understand it. We've got positionally better players than them in every position on the park. So how are they beating us? Like, it's just blows my mind, mate, that we're sitting here in a season review after what we had last season, where St Johnstone was the only team we couldn't win against last season. To St Johnstone's the only team that we beat comfortably, or not comfortably, but we've beat like 3 times this season. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's just bad. Like, I don't know what's happened in the team in a space. Well, having 3 managers will not help at all, like, mind you, but it's just what it tells me is that we need to get it sorted, and we've got a new manager whose task is to sort it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think for the top down, it needs to change. Everybody, and I'm talking about this like off the pitch as well. Everybody, for Ron Gordon downwards, needs to take a little bit of the blame for that. Everybody, because Jack Ross, I don't think was back properly, because he even said that in the press that he didn't get the players he wanted, and that led to a head of recruitment change, which, you know, I think Graham Matty was maybe the scapegoat. He was the head that had to roll for that. You know, we had a poor summer window. The winter window wasn't much better, to be honest. So I think, yeah, managers maybe no getting the players they wanted was a problem. But yeah, I think everybody needs to take a bit of the blame. Everybody apart from, like, obviously, I've got to say now, the media staff like Adam and the commercial staff like Greg, they all did a fantastic job. They're the only figures at the club will say did their jobs properly this season. Because a lot of the players certainly didn't. But I think, yeah, to me, it does shift on the players. I think it's about 60-40 for me. 60% on the players. A lot of them just weren't good enough and didn't put in enough of a shift. 40% on each of the managers. I think David Gray was completely out of his depth both times, both spells. Although I think the first time went better than the second time, to be honest. Sean Maloney, again, completely out of his depth. We are not a club that should be somebody's first job. I think we talked about this when we reacted to Maloney's sacking. We're not a club because there's too much in it. There's too much expectation. I'm talking about from the board. Obviously, Ron's a very ambitious owner. He wants us to be winning trophies, competing for European football. So there's too much expectation upstairs, and there's too much expectation in the stand, because we know we're a very hard fan base to please. So the manager needs to get it spot on, and that's why I think Maloney was just too much of a risk. Jack Ross, as much as I think Jack Ross should have been given a chance, I think when he was let go, it sort of had to happen. As much as in hindsight, it wasn't a good idea. That run we were on was bad. I mean, it was relegation form. We talked about it. It was relegation form. That's how Dundee played. If you look at it, that run we went on. So how Dundee went on runs like that. So I think when you look at it, everybody's got to take a part of the blame, and I think Ron's recognised that when he came out and spoke to the press. That he said, "Look, it's a collective effort from everybody at the club, and we failed from a footballing sense." I think there was loads of good things done off the pitch this season. You know, I think the big tellies, they were fantastic. I think a good addition to the stadium. We did a lot of good corporate stuff. We did a lot of good engagement with the fans. Did a lot of good stuff with the Dnipro kids, the community foundation. So off the pitch, we did a lot of brilliant stuff. But on the pitch, to me, everybody's got to take a bit of responsibility for how bad it's been on the pitch for the men's team this season. To be honest, you know, it's as simple as that. Nobody's innocent, to be honest. It's as simple as that. Coaching staff, we went through them at some rate as well. Coaching staff, players, the top brass, because Ben Kinsella, Ron Gordon, Ian Gordon, they make the decisions at the end of the day. And some of their decisions did affect not Ron directly, because obviously Ron was hands off. That's the whole point of Ben coming in, is so Ron could have a bit of a rest and take care of his other interests. But I think Ben Kinsella, there's been some decision making from him that's been at best questionable, and that I'm not having a go, because I wouldn't want to be the CEO of a football club. It's not an easy job. But I have got to say that a lot of decisions made have affected what's happened on the pitch. And that's what I'm saying. Nobody's innocent for the top down. So I think the only people this season that deserve any sort of round of applause is the players that tried, the fans for putting up with it, for us for putting up with it, and the commercial staff and the community foundation and other staff at the club that actually, did a lot of positive things. I've got to say, it's actually off the pitch, it's actually been quite a positive, and on the pitch with the women's team and with the youth setup, it's actually been quite a positive season. You look at under-18s, did well in their league. The women's team had a strong season, like we were talking about in their review, and we're obviously in coming weeks going to talk about the off-pitch successes and the behind the scenes. So I do think in that respect it was actually a good season, but it wasn't on the pitch. And like I said, that was a cold hard number that really sort of sums up that 38% win rate. So now move on to the player stats. I'll very quickly go through them. So first of all, our top goal scorers. So we'll do the top three like we did with the women's team. So first of all, our top goal scorer this season with 13 goals is Martin Boyle. And the fact that that's a player that left the club before Christmas, that tells you all you need to know, really. Because obviously Martin Boyle, the transfer to Al Fazli went through sort of just during the winter window. Kevin Nisbet with 9 goals, which I think, considering Kev got a lot of stick, it's better than a lot of people I think maybe expected them to do, or maybe think that number would have been a bit lower. Then tied on third is James Scott and Kyle McGuinness with 4. Now, James Scott, all 4 of those came at the end of the season and 3 were in one game. Kyle McGuinness has been injured for the majority of this season. So that, again, tells you all you need to know. It tells you how much we were struggling for creativity across the park, to be honest. Because if you look at it, if you look at the top 3 goal scorers with the women's team, again, Alexa and Mickey, Ailey and Cav, who were the second and then the joint thirds, were all in double figures still. We've only got, the men's team only had 1 player on double figures for goal scored, which is shocking. And I think it goes a long way to explaining why we ended up where we did. Creativity was obviously a massive issue. I think we harped on about it just about every time we played, even when we won this season. And I think that was our Achilles heel, really, was the fact we can't score. Because you can I think the thing is you can concede goals. That happens. Because look at us under Lennon. I mean, quite a few games under Lennon, we were conceding like 2-3 goals a game, but we were outscoring the opposition. I think that's the difference. And like you said, Charlie, mate, it was eye-bleeding stuff to watch. So there's the top goal scorers. The top assists, Martin Boyle and Scott Allen were joint top assist providers this season with 5 apiece. Again, that tells you all you need to know that Scott Allen's not had the best season individually and has hardly played, and he's still got the joint top assist with Martin Boyle, who again left the club. In second, we have a joint second with Josh Campbell and Paul McGinn, 4 apiece. But I think I was quite surprised. I knew Paul McGinn would be quite high. I mean, Paul's actually had after a sort of bad start, Paul's actually come quite good, because he's also up there with the goals as well, which is interesting that your right back, who's not had the best season in the world, is also one of your top goal scorers in the top 5. And then obviously in joint and third is Josh Doyle, Joe Newell, Chris Cadden and Kevin Nisbet with 3 assists. Again, it just shows you that we didn't have a good creative performances. I'm losing words for this because it's depressing, really. Again, those numbers, Charlie, they're not very good, are they?
No, not in the same, mate, except that is embarrassing.
Yeah, it is. And again, look, when you're comparing, obviously we didn't get the assist stats, the women's teams, they were quite difficult to find. But I'd suspect the women's team's assist would be a lot better than that as well. And a lot of people say you shouldn't compare men and women's football, but to me, it's nothing to do with your gender or what level you play at. It's to do with creativity in a squad. And I think the women's team in general were just a more creative team this season. Look at it. And, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, mate. And we'll now move on to clean sheets. So Matt Macy kept a grand total of 14 clean sheets this season, which I was actually surprised at. I thought it would have been a lot less with some of the howlers Macy's had certain games. But I think the howlers maybe take away from the fact that he did have some strong performances and goals. And also it proves he wasn't as bad defensively as people maybe want to think we are. Because actually had the third best defence in the league this season, which is surreal when you think about how bad it's been for us. So yeah, Macy with 14 clean sheets, which is one more than Gabby, actually, which I thought was really interesting. And Kevin DeBrusque, it's a team in the backup keepers, Derby heroics, and keeping 3 clean sheets. So Emily and Kevin both kept 3 clean sheets this season. I think that's not bad for Kevin. And obviously, I think keeping the clean sheet and having that strong performance that he did in the Derby Easter Road, I think it's actually been an okay. We'll obviously talk about we're going to Tiermaker. That's actually all right for Kevin. But I was that Macy had kept 14, but I thought it would have been a lot lower than that when I went and checked on the stats. And then finally, I'll finish up as we did with the women's team with the XG this season. Our XG was 1. That was our XG this season, which is funny because I think the women's team was 0.96, but I think the extra competition is what does that. So there we go. XG is just a number. If anybody wants to challenge that, you can blame Transfermarkt because that's where I found it. So I don't think that if anybody wants to come in and give us the real number, because I think that I'm struggling to believe that with how much we struggled for goals this season. But then again, XG doesn't actually have anything to do with you actually scoring goals. So there we go. So Charlie, it's over to you now, mate. That was a depressing reality of how bad this season was.
Aye.
And now we're going to move on to the Tiermaker, which is going to be very, very fun. I think there's going to be a few players that might not want to speak to us after this.
Well, you can see on the screen that we've got a Tiermaker of every player who's played for Hibs men this season. Some of them,
the less said, the better.
Aye, less said the better. So we'll start, Jack. We'll start with Scott Allen. Never really had a good season, did he? But rocked up with 5 assists and was it 1 or 2 goals? 1 or 2 goals, I think, this season.
Yeah. So. For me, I'd actually put Scott in the frustrating. And by the way, I just wanted to say, I think this is going. The women's team win again was a lot more positive than this one.
this is going to be more towards the average to bottom category, I think.
Yeah, it's going to work the same as the women's team one as well. I just want to clear that up. But yeah, for me, I'm going to say Scott goes in frustrating because it was the game time for me more than anything else, and the fact that that this is the end of it for Scott. I think, at least as a Hibs player, I can't see him staying around next season. He looked past it in a lot of the games, to be honest, when he came on. And a lot of people maybe pointed him out as a saviour, but he's not. He's really not. But I still think he's got to go into frustrating. He's done well enough not to go into poor, because I think obviously he got 5 assists. He popped up with a few goals here and there. And I think earlier on in the season, he actually changed a few games when he came on, especially against Livingston. I think we were struggling against Livy in the game. We beat them 2-0. So when Scott Allen came on, he did make an impact. So for me, it's a combination of the game time and the fact that's him done in terms of being a Hibs player. Scott goes into frustrating.
I totally agree, mate. I think I'm glad to see the back of him at Hibs. I think I've not been a fan of him the past wee while, so I'm glad he's leaving. So we'll move on to Martin Boyle. I think there's really only one place that he's going. I think
Player of
the year. I think to be top goal scorer and leave in January, you've done something right. Or actually, your teammates have done something wrong. So I think Boyle was class this season. I think well deserved in his move, and hopefully we see him back in a Hibs shirt before too long.
Yeah, I've not got anything to add to that apart from it shows you how good Martin Boyle really is as a player.
Absolutely.
You compare it to how far he's come to when he first joined us to that. Yeah. It's amazing. So yeah, and he deserved the big move, and it's fantastic for him and his young family as well.
Aye, so we now move on to the actual player of the year. So he's going up here, Chris Cadden. Well deserved, in my opinion. I think he's been Mr. Consistent when he's played this year. I think there's not really been a game where he's put a foot wrong. And was obviously unlucky with that injury towards the end of the season. But I think he's really come on leaps and bounds since when he joined as well. Because I wasn't really convinced by him last season, but obviously he got an injury when he came in. Hopefully that's not a sign of things to come. But I thought he was well deserved.
Yeah, definitely. I've got to agree with that. Yeah, exactly. Mr. Consistency. And he's had a good season. He's been one of our best, if not the best player, obviously, after Boyler left. Always puts in a solid 7, 8 out of 10 performance every game. And yeah, Mr. Dependable.
Aye. So now we come on to the first contentious one. We've got Josh Campbell, who is pretty much the scapegoat for a lot of Hibs fans. So Jack, what's your thought on Josh Campbell? Where do you think he should end up in this tier?
I'd put him in frustrating because he's a young lad that I think was thrown in at the deep end and too much was expected of him at once. You've seen glimpses of him being a good player. You see it was like a duck to water against Rangers in the semi when he got the start. I think also against Celtic, those are the games that suited him. Against Aberdeen in the 1-1 game post-split. So he's had a few good games, but in other games St Mirren, their winner was directly his fault, giving it away. And I think a lot of the times he just looked completely out of his depth in the middle of the park. So for me, it's frustrating because he's a young lad that too much was expected of him at the one time, but he did have a few good games in there.
I totally agree. I think the bigger games are maybe his sort of game where we're not expected to have a lot of the ball and he's just there fighting for it. So I would say frustrating as well. So moving on, Harry Clark obviously came in January with a big fanfare and then got injured straight away. But thankfully was fit before the end of the season and we got to see him sort of, I would say, his best. I think he's been really good. So Jack, where would you put Harry Clark?
I'd actually, I'm going to put him in average, and I'll tell you why. Put him in average because I think he did too well when he came back to be frustrating. And he's done far too well to be poor. He came back for the injury, obviously got the goal. Who was it against again?
Dundee United.
Dundee United, that was it. He's got the goal against Dundee United, and he was the only player that I think genuinely cared in a lot of those games. You could tell how frustrated he was. Just about every game he played once he came back, he was good and was one of our better players. So yeah, I think for me, Harry goes into average, and it would have been good if he hadn't got injured. I think if we'd seen more of him, I think definitely Harry Clark would have turned into one of our best players. It's just a shame that injury came when it did. So for me, I'd say he'd been average. He did what he needed to do in terms of a player in his position. He showed a lot of fight. He showed a lot of spirit in the games. And he also recognised that us as supporters weren't happy with certain performances, and he did apologise for that, and he engaged with fans positively. So for me, yeah, Harry goes into the average in that one.
I'd put him in average as well. I think it's verging towards good though, but I think his injury probably pull him back a bit. So I'd put him in average. So now we come to Christian Doidge. For me, it's poor, and I've got
to say that as well.
And I think this is him done at Hibs. I don't think we'll see him next season. So, and I know he scored a couple of goals, but it's been a poor season. And his first game back, he got sent off as well. So I think there's not really much else to say other than that was a poor season. That was a poor season for you, Dodgy. Similar name but different. Josh Doig. I think I would put him in Player of the Year.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think Josh is. You wondered how he's going to get. Obviously, he had that standout breakout campaign last season. You think, how's he going to do? It's always hard for a young player to follow up on that, and sometimes you can get a bit of second season syndrome and fade away. But Josh, I think, has been fantastic for us this season, and I think visibly you could see visible improvement. He added to a lot of his game for last season. He wasn't making mistakes that he maybe did last season, and he's become a solid, dependable part of the team. Josh Doig, and he's an amazing young man with a huge future. So for me, Doig straight in there, Player of the Year.
Aye, definitely. Then hopefully we keep him this summer. I know there's been rumours that teams are interested, so be interested to see how that pans out. Next on the list, we've got Jake Doyle-Hayes. I would put him in frustrating, personally. I think it's been a very, very frustrating season to watch. Obviously, he scored those 2 goals against Ross County, but other than that, I don't know if he made a forward pass.
Well, that's what I was about to say, mate. Is for me, that's the frustrating thing. The only game I've ever seen him not wincing it out of physical battles was Hearts at home in the the Easter Road derby, 0-0. For me, yeah, Jake's been frustrating. He came in with a lot of promise. He'd had a good season with St Mirren. We obviously beat Dundee United to his signature, which I'm wishing now Dundee United had taken him. But honestly, like, I think that the laddie just does not have a forward pass in his locker. And apart, if it hadn't been for the 2 goals, I would have actually put him in poor.
So would I.
Simple as that. But he scored those 2 really good goals, and you got all credit to him. Why he couldn't do that before that and after that is beyond me.
Yeah.
And also, there was stuff after, like, you know, I think if anybody heard the stories about him saying, well, you win some, you lose some, and after the derby and everything like that, I think all in all, Jake's attitude maybe wasn't the best in certain games as well. So for me, yeah, Jake's frustrating. He's just been a massively frustrating player. And I think, to be honest, next season, if Lee Johnson gets the players he wants, I genuinely think that Jake Doyle has just become part of the furniture. He might end up being like a Melker Hallberg, where he's just sort of there, to be honest.
Aye, well, Jake, you're in frustrating. Now over to the captain, Paul Hanlon. Well, Jack, I'll let you share your thoughts first before I share mine.
I'm gonna, I put Paul on average. He's done okay this season. I don't think it's anywhere near good enough to get put in good, but he's done what he needed to do, and he takes a lot of unfair flack off of certain people, including you. I genuinely think that Paul's is he the captain? No, he shouldn't be the captain. He's not captain material. Has he done what he's needed to do for us this season? Yes. I know he's made a few mistakes here and there, but I think genuinely he's in other games been your usual solid, dependable, work cost defender, and he's just had an average. A bit like Joel for me. Like, for me, he's exactly. I'm going to say I don't want to repeat myself with what I've said to Joel, so just refer what I've said to Joel, except change it to Paul Hanlon. I think just an average season for what you expect out of a veteran centre half.
Yeah, I would put him in average as well. He's an average football player, an average captain. So by that, he gets put in that category. And I'm not speaking about him again. Anyway, Ewan Henderson, I would put Ewan in the frustrating category because I think he needs to have an extra 1,000 calories a day before he is a Hibs player. I think he's very weak on the ball. And I mean, he took his goal well at St Mirren, but I just think he's still pretty weak on the ball, and I think he needs a big season of bulking up.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ewan Henderson frustrating because we've seen the flashes of what he can do, but I just think he needs that little bit more time to bulk up, as you said, get used to being physical, add that physicality to his game. And I think we've got a good player on our hands, but for me, yeah, frustrating. He did take his goal well, though. I do agree with that.
Yeah, so Ewan goes into frustrating as well. Now we've got Sylvester Jasper joined Hibs on loan in January, and rumours are to be said that we're not taking up that option to buy him permanently. So, Jack, where would you put Jasper?
Frustrating, and I'll tell you why. Because again, a bit like Henderson in a way that you've seen the player that was there, but the fancy flicks and skill moves and step overs and everything. No, I don't like watching that. It doesn't work in Scotland because you're just going to get sat on your arse by a big mean defender. It's as simple as that. In some games, Jasper actually got bullied. In some games, his directness was good. In other games, it was to our detriment. Livy away, for me in particular, the way he was trying to, bamboozle Oberlai, it just wasn't working because Oberlai wasn't taking it, and Jasper was getting bullied. And he gets bullied in just about every game against a physical side like Livy that he's played. So for me, Jasper goes in frustrating because all these fancy moves and everything, you need to have an end product to it as well. And he didn't have that. Like I said about Cav, Cav has that bit of flair to her game, but she has an end product. Canberry, when he first joined us, had that bit of flair to his game, but he had an end product. Jasper didn't have it. And if you've no got it, to me with Jasper, it's all fart and nae jobby, to be honest. To use that, I've got to thank Matty for that one. To use an expression, it's all fart and nae jobby with Jasper. It's very good watching him do all that stuff, and then it doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, for me, Jasper goes into frustrating.
Yeah, I would agree. I personally don't rate Jasper at all. So I'm glad we're not taking him up on that option to buy him. So now we come to the first of the two keepers. Obviously, David Mitchell's not getting rated because he never played. So we've got Kev Dabrowski, Jack. Obviously played a couple of times for Hibs this season. Made his big derby debut and was man of the match, I would say. So where would you put Dabrowski?
I think on a personal level, he's actually had a good season because, you know, for going and getting no game time and like getting put out on loan to teams like Cowdenbeath and Dumbarton, for the manager to put faith in him, stepped up in the derby, kept a clean sheet, and I think, to be honest, at certain points, Kev kept us in that game. And then other games he's played in, I think he's actually had decent performances. So for me, on a personal level, Kev's had a good season, especially keeping that clean sheet in the derby, and all his charity work as well off the pitch. So for me, yeah, Kev goes into the good.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's a good keeper. It'll be interesting to see where he fits in with obviously David Marshall now coming in and having Macy on the books as well. So we'll see. Anyway, on to the next keeper, and it's Matt Macy. For me, I would put Macy in the average category. I think he's had a pretty average season. Like, he's obviously kept a lot of clean sheets and whatever, but I just think I'm just not convinced by him. I think he's an all right keeper, but I don't think he's what we need as a club going forward as our number one choice.
No, I think Macy does the basics right, but he doesn't excite me, and he does have some bad mistakes in him. He's not quick enough when he's releasing the ball. His distribution gives me the fear, to be honest. So, yeah, I think for me, Macy goes into average, and he goes up there. I think one of the sort of more poor Hibs keepers, to be honest. I think you put him. I'd put him in the same category as Macalambi, to be honest, with keepers that have just not really that have sort of been a bit like, every time you see them, you go, oh God, what's he going to do now?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Macy in other games he's done the bit. He's went for being like a Marciano in some games. He does the basics right, and you do what you expect him to do. To being a Macalambi in other games, he's just an utter bomb scare.
Aye, well, Macy goes into the frustrate. No, what did we say? Sorry.
Average.
Sorry, I had a complete mind blank where I was putting him there.
Because see, well, at Abs when I mentioned Macalambi, with good old spider hands, eh?
Anyway, now we come to Mr. Injury himself, Kyle McGuinness. Obviously started the season well, but got that injury and hasn't been seen since. So it's a hard one to put for Kyle, because he's one of our top scorers, which isn't great in itself, being injured for most 98% of the season. But I would definitely put him in frustrating, because I think he started really well, and then obviously we've not seen him since.
Yeah, I think I put it frustrating, but not frustrating as in he's been frustrating. I think it's frustrating for him. Because if he hadn't got that injury when he did, I genuinely think, and then obviously he re-injured himself as well. I think he would have been he would have been in that Player of the Year category, if you ask me, if he hadn't got injured. So for me, for Kyle, it's been frustrating. He did too well at the start of the season to be put into poor. So for me, yep, Kyle goes into frustrating.
Yeah. Right. Well, here comes vice captain Paul McGinn. I would actually put Paul in the good category. I think every time I've seen him play this season, he's not put a foot wrong. And I think, obviously he's got a contract extension, which I would say is well deserved. I think he's a good squad member to have about the team. But obviously he knows he's going to be second or third choice right back, with depending on if Harry Clark stays, we've got Cad in as well. So I'd put him in good, because I think he's had a good season.
Yeah, I agree. I think Paul's had a good season. He didn't have the greatest start to the season. Obviously, he was a scapegoat at the start of the season for a lot of our mistakes, but he's came good after he had a little spell out of the team. He came good when he got back into the team, scored a good few goals, got a good few assists, and he's done everything that you'd expect him to do. And I think, all in all, he's a solid and dependable player and a good servant to have around the club.
Aye. So now we move on to another good servant of the club. We've got Darren McGregor, and I would probably put Daz in the poor category, only because I think he got more red cards than he played games this season.
He's got more red cards and got minutes this season, I think. I love Darren McGregor a bit, but he's done, isn't he? He's too old, far too old. Poor for me. Nothing against Daz. Calvin's probably going to have a brain aneurysm when he watches this, but I think no more McGregor Mondays. But I think the thing is, Daz, I think he knows that himself. And the only good thing he did this season was captaining us out against St Johnstone on the last game, and he did all right in that game. But obviously, he got sent off against Rijeka. I think that changed the game. We got ourselves back into it. I think directly Daz getting sent off lost us that as badly as it did. He got sent off against Livy in Jack Ross's last game. That caused us problems. He's been sent off just about every time he's been on the park this season, which isn't exactly great, is it? So, I think he's got to go into poor. I think, unfortunately, Daz, for me, his time at Hibs is coming to end, but he's been a fantastic servant to the club all this season.
He has indeed, and he won the Cup in 2016 as well, so being a good servant. Now we come to the first of the permanent January. Oh no, sorry, second, Ewan Henderson is permanent as well, but first proper permanent signing because he wasn't on loan. Elias Melkerson. Jack, where would you put him, taking into consideration he scored those 2 against Motherwell, but has also missed an absolute sitter in a couple of games?
Average. Bang average for me. I mean, he came in with a lot of hype. I like Elias, and I think next season he'll maybe come good. He'll have a full season to adapt. Those League Cup group stage games will be good for him. But for me, he's just bang average this season. Scored 2 good goals. Gets bullied about the park just about every game. I mean, I talked about Oberlai. Oberlai was terrorising him when we played Livy. Got bullied at Tynecastle. Got bullied by Dundee United. Missed that sitter. If Melkerson scores that goal, we win that game, and we would have had top 6 in the derby defeat. As much as it would have been so, it would have been meaningless, really. So I think, Melkerson's got to go down as average, and purely because he just didn't live up to the hype either, to be honest. And obviously, a lot of people hyped him up, and he's just not really achieved that. But I think we'll see more out of him. It's a big step up for a young lad to leave home, to come to a country that's completely alien and foreign to him, and also play a style of football and in a league that's completely different to what you're used to. So I think we'll see more of Melkerson next season. He's a young lad. He's going to develop, but for me, bang average.
I would agree. I think he's a project, so I think we'll see him come. I think we'll see him come good this season coming up. Now we move on to Dimitri Mitchell. He used to be a Jambo, but he's all right now. Jack, where would you? I thought Dimitri Mitchell's been good this season up until he got injured. So I'm not. I'd probably put him in average, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
I'd put him in average. I think for what I've seen of him before he got injured, obviously he was it against who was it he scored against? Like Livingston, I think it was.
Livingston and Arbroath.
Livingston and Arbroath, yeah. So I think he got 2 goals to his name. I forgot about the Arbroath goal. 2 goals to his name. And he's every time I watched him play, he's looked good. Very direct, not afraid to take guys on, got a bit of physicality, isn't afraid to get stuck in there. But unfortunately, again, a bit like with Kyle McGuinness, in a way, the injury came at the wrong time. For me, he goes into average, and because we've seen signs of him being a good player. So I think Demi Mitchell's been a dependable player, quite solid, and it's just a shame the injury came when it did.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we come to Mr. Owl himself.
When you play, you make the high beast sing.
Chris Muller, I think the less said about him, the better, and I think he's going there. Anyway, moving on. Joe Newell.
Yeah, just exactly go.
We'll just forget that ever happened. Joe Newell. Now, I would put Joe in the good category because I think he's had a good season. Obviously, the frustrating part is he doesn't shoot. But I think he's our best centre midfielder. Spot
on, mate. Joe goes in the good for me. Joe's been fantastic, and a wee shout out to Orla. I know she'll be happy with that. So I think Joe, he does everything that you need a central midfielder to do. I'd like to see him shoot more, and he has got it in him. I've watched him when he used to. I watched old highlights when he used to play at Rotherham, and he's got it in his locker. He's got some beauties in his locker, so I hope we see that soon. But Joe's been brilliant for us this season, and like you said, mate, he's our best midfielder by a long stretch, I think, and does everything right. He's put in some big performances. Semi-finally put in a big performance. Derby 0-0 at Easter Road, he put in a big performance, and in a lot of games, he's about the only player that got pass marks from me as well. So I think for me, Joe Newell is definitely good, and he gets what the club's all about as well, which is very rare for players that aren't actually Hibs fans.
Yep. I think the big performance in the semi-final was getting sent off, like, but I agree.
Well, I was talking about the I don't know about what I do not know what semi-final you're referring to. Talk about the one
that's
when
true.
their big brothers 3-1.
Oh,
so,
sorry. Anyway,
that's
moving
what
on.
I mean. I was talking about that semi-final. You divot.
Kevin Nisbet. I'd put Kevin in the good category. I think people forget when he's in the team what he offers to the team, but realise when he's out the team what he offers to the team. I think I'm definitely one of those people. I was getting frustrated with him, but I think he's actually a really good player. And I think obviously his injury came at the wrong time. But he's in one of the top goal scorers, so I think that merits a good place in the tier maker.
I've got to agree. Nizzy's got to go in the good. I think obviously I wasn't his biggest fan. I think a lot of people know that, but we've realised how much we've missed him when he's not been in the team. I think that the reason we've been struggling for goals so much is because Nisbet's not been there after he got that really bad injury. I'd like to thank Carl Starfelt for that, you useless Swedish numpty. But I think that's the worst thing a Swedish person's done in Edinburgh since ABBA, if you ask me. So I think, to be honest, Nisbet is good, and he is, for my money, our best striker. So
I would say so.
Yeah, so for me, Nisbet's got in the good eye.
Aye, well, we move on to another potentially contentious one between the two of us. Ryan Porteous. Jack, where would you put Porteous?
Porto's got to go in Player of the Year for me. I mean, honestly, I think I've got to say it. Porto's got to go in Player of the Year. He's had another good season. He's gets what it means to play for the club. He puts up in his absolute best every game. I know he got a few silly red cards this season, or well, one of them wasn't even a red card, but that's it. And you want a player that winds up the opposition fans, and to me, he's a bit of a Scott Brown figure. He's a bit of a hothead. He likes to wind up the Rangers, but he is, at the end of the day, a young man that is a very good footballer. For me, our best defender. Porteous is our best defender for me. Simple as that. Porteous is our best defender, and he's had another brilliant season, and I just hope he kicks on. Get the contract in on the table and hope he stays, because Porteous is a lad that properly he bleeds green, Porteous, doesn't he? So for me, yeah, Porteous has got to go and Player of the Year.
Well, I disagree with you, mate, and I'll tell you why. I think his discipline's been shocking this season. I think he's picked up too many silly yellows and silly reds. And I think I would verge on him going in the good category. I think if we'd had 2 or 3 less bookings, then I'd put him Player of the Year. But I think purely on the fact that his discipline's been a bit suspect at times, I think because I'm in charge, I think he's going to go in here.
We'll say that's meeting the middle ground. We'll put it in the good. It's meeting the middle ground.
So we go on to another January signing, Rocky Bashiri. And I think the less said about him, the better as well. I don't know.
Actually, I'd like to jump in here and say that I'd actually put Rocky in the frustrating instead of the poor. And I'll tell you why. Because I think you could, again, there was certain games where you could see the player in there. But at other times, he's just been a big bomb scare. So simple as that. I mean, the worst one for me was in the derby for their equaliser, is he should have launched Sims into the stand, and he gives him far too much room. You're a big guy, Rocky. I know Sims is a pretty big guy as well. You're a big guy. You can just launch a boy like Sims into the stand and get rid of the ball. He doesn't really fill me with confidence anytime he's on the ball. But I think in some games, and of course, the heroes are both the money for a match ball as well. I mean, God knows where that's going to get found. I mean, there'll be some polar bear using it as a toy up Antarctica or something. But I think genuinely, I put him in frustration because I've seen the player there. And you've got to remember, he got thrown into the deep end as a young lad when he was in Belgium, goes to Norwich, doesn't play a minute of senior football. He plays in the Premier League B, comes up here. It's a whole new sort of vibe, if you like, for him. He's got to get used to it. And like I said, you did see the player there in certain games. In other games, like I said, he's just a bomb scare. So for me, he's got to go and frustrate him, because I think it would be slightly unfair to put him in the poor purely because he did have some okay performances.
We'll go frustrating. I'm glad he's leaving. I'm glad we're not going to take him.
Yeah, I'm glad he's not a player that should have ever been near us, to be honest.
No.
But I feel slightly sorry for him.
Anyway, on to another player that is probably going to end towards the bottom end of the scale is James Scott. I think the only thing that stopped him from being a poor season is his 4 goals. So I think he'll go into frustrating because I think, obviously being a £1 million player and going to Hull, you've got a bit of a hype when you come into a team, and he just never lived up to it until the last 2 games. And I think he was, I think he referenced that himself in his interview that it's been a frustrating season for him and he wishes it clicked earlier, but I would put him in the frustrating one.
Yeah, I think James, he had the ability. See if he'd found that earlier on in the season, I think he would have been looking at a good or an average season. He just got to go in frustrating because as much as he was doing okay, the goals just didn't come. And like you said, for a £1 million player, there's an expectation there on what you've got to do. And also his condition, which wasn't necessarily his fault. It partly was, obviously. I can't Calvin alluded to it when we reviewed the St Johnstone game, that you've got to help get yourself fit as well. I mean, I'd run a marathon if I had the opportunity to play for Hibs, but I think the thing is, James came up in a poor condition. That didn't help, and the lack of service didn't help. So for me, some of it's not James's fault. If he found the form earlier, he could have been one of our best players this season. It's as simple as that. So for me, it's got to go down as frustrating. I agree with you, mate.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll go on to Mr. Hibs. Louis got 2 Player of the Year for me.
Yeah,
I think he's been very consistent.
I think when you and me go on about sentiment FC quite a lot. Really, the sentiment is very much high here right now. For me, Louis, he's rolling back the years. Every time he's played this, and I said it all the way back at the Rijeka game, every time he's played this season, he's been fantastic, and you could put him anywhere on the pitch and he put in a shift. And that's why he got the Players' Player of the Year as well. It's as simple as that. Louis oozes class, and even although he's a veteran, he's still wanting to compete for a place in the team, and he's been fantastic every time he's played, put in a solid shift, and in some games he's actually made the difference for us as well, especially I think against Arbroath. So for me, Louis Player of the Year without a doubt.
Aye, definitely. Well, we move on to Dre Wright, another one of the scapegoats throughout the whole season by the fans, especially when he come on against, was it Ross County, got booed.
Yeah, got booed.
Him and James Scott. So I'd probably put him in frustrating. I think the only thing he done this season,
because
the only thing he done this season was that goal at Tynecastle,
which obviously counted for nothing. But I think for me, there's not much else to say. I like Dre as a player, but for me, I've just never seen enough of him to go like, is he good enough to be at Hibs? Probably not. But I do think he does what he needs to do. He's like a new man under Maloney. When Maloney first came in, Dre was like a new man. And you've seen some of his best football under Maloney, which is not great if you think about it. But I think for me, Dre's got to go in frustrating because he's a good player, but he's just not good enough, and we've not seen enough of him either. Yeah.
So now we come to, we'll do Runar Hauga first before we do the other ones. So where would you put Hauga, Jack?
You know what? I'll put Hauga in average, and I'll tell you why. And a lot of people go, it'll be hard to play. Any time Hauga came on, I actually think he was good. Like, seriously. And to be honest, I think Hauga's got a lot more promise than Melkerson does, to be honest. I see more in what I like personally in a player in Hauga. So Hauga obviously he's very direct, he's got that physicality about him, and he's also a very self-assured player, and he doesn't let himself get bullied. I think Melkerson can sometimes get a bit, I want to say anxious in games. Melkerson can be a bit, sometimes in the big occasion, he doesn't want to really step up and he goes into himself, but Hauga looks really confident and struts about the park when he comes on. So for me, Hauga's actually been average, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we get at Hauga. Bear in mind, he only got a place in the squad because of the injury crisis. He originally meant to be a signing for the B team. But I think Hauga's been fantastic every time he's come on. I've really liked watching him, and I really hope we see more of him next season.
I think he's been average as well. I think he's not been frustrating because every time we've seen him, he's looked good. And hopefully we see him kick on next season. So I would agree. So we'll go with the players who, we'll go through them individually. So Dan Mackay, poor, I would say.
Yeah. I think for me, he came in with a lot of promise. He done really well for Inverness Calais. That's a good young player. Doesn't really get any game time. He's one-on-one with the keeper against Rijeka and skies it. It's
Doesn't he get any game
the
time at Kelly either?
Yeah, didn't get any game time at Kelly, which is not great. But all I was got to say is it's just as well the famous 5-stand was shut for those games, else he would have killed a child with that shot. I mean, honestly, I think if Dan Mackay could have been a hero if he'd scored that, by the way. So like I said, it would have had a different complex on the tie. I think, for me, Dan Mackay is just poor. He's not done anything. He goes to Kelly on loan, doesn't play a single game or much games, and then he comes back and you're like, what do we do with him? Yep. Seriously. Like, what do we do? I mean, because he's not really done it. If he'd had an amazing loan spell at Kelly, I would have been like, oh, brilliant. Let's see what he's going to do next season. But he's not done that. He's not had a brilliant. And the only thing I can say is he's got to prove himself. And if Lee Johnson likes to look at him, he's got to prove himself big time in those League Cup games.
Yeah,
big time. So for me, yeah, it's poor for Dan Mackay.
Do you think he'll have a space in the team next season, Jack?
I highly doubt it.
Yeah, me too. Right, we'll move on. Alex Gogic, poor for me again.
Yeah, big Alexandros Gogic.
Get in that bottom tier.
It's, to be honest, I never really liked Gogic to begin with. Like, he had an okay season last season. He wasn't even that good. If we were doing this based on last season, we would have put him in average. He's a hatchet man, and he's never going to be any more than an average player. Anytime he did play this season, he's made a lot of mistakes, and then he's got loaned out to St Mirren and has not really done anything there. So yeah, he's got to go down as a poor for me.
Right, Jamie Murphy, poor for me.
Poor.
Yeah.
He's got hamstrings made of cheese.
I'm glad he's away.
Yeah, Jamie Murphy for me was just never good enough to be at Hibs, to be honest.
And next, playing a matter of 90 minutes for Hibs, Nathan Wood, and it was one of the worst performances I've ever seen in a Hibs jersey. So, to
be honest, like for me, he was like, I honestly thought he was going to be like Mavropanos, if you remember him, where he was just never going to play. It was like one of these players that you find him and like, who the hell are they? Well, oh, they're gone. But he plays in that Dundee United game. He looked like a rabbit in the headlights. Got completely mugged off by just about every Dundee United attacking player in that game, and that was it. Off you go. And
I would like to remind you, Jack, that he was next to Paul Hanlon in that game. So
I'd also like to remind you that he made Paul Hanlon look like Christ. He made Paul Hanlon look like a Ballon d'Or winner in that game. To be honest,
I did.
For me, Wood was really, and then he came in with a lot of hype as well. Wood. So yeah, Wood's poor. And to be honest, I feel slightly sorry for him because he did come in with a lot of hype with his England under-21 caps, and Middlesbrough fans giving us delusions of grandeur, saying, he's like a really good young player, he's got the ability to be the next Ferdinand and everything like that. What Ferdinand are we talking about here?
Anton.
Yeah, exactly. It's his crap brother, no him.
And last but probably least, Melker Hallberg. Poor.
Yeah. I think the thing is Hallberg's proven himself to be a decent player at a certain level. He's been one of St Johnson's best players this season. When you look at look at the way he tore Inverness apart in that playoff.
Yeah.
I think the thing is for me with Hallberg is he was never ever quite to our level. He did a job, and I did like him as a player, but he was just never good enough to be a Hibs player, if you ask me. And I still can't get over him celebrating a 90th minute consolation goal in a 3-1 Derby loss. I'm still to this day angry about that. It fills me with uncontrollable rage. So I think, he's got to go down as poor Hallberg. To me, he's just, to me, I'm going to be honest, he's a Swedish Jake Doyle-Hayes, if you ask me. Seriously, I think Jake Doyle-Hayes could end up going that way, to be honest. But, Hallberg is where he is. I think St Johnson's his level.
Well, I'll just run through the tier maker and then we'll talk about player of the year. So In the Player of the Year category, we've put Martin Boyle, Chris Cadden, Josh Doig, and Lewis Stevenson. In the good category, we've put Kev Dabrowski, Paul McGinn, Joe Newell, Kevin Nisbet, and Ryan Porteous. Average, we've put Harry Clark, Paul Hanlon, Matt Macy, Elias Melkerson, Dimitri Mitchell, and Runar Hauga. Frustrating, which is by far the biggest category, we've put Scott Allen, Josh Campbell, Jadal Hayes, Ewan Henderson, Sylvester Jasper, Cal McGuinness, Rocky Bashiri, James Scott, and Dre Wright. And in the poor category, we've put Christian Doidge, Darren McGregor, Chris Muller, Dan Mackay, Alex Goggins, Jamie Murphy, Nathan Wood, and Milker Hallberg.
What a five-a-side team that poor category is.
Aye. Well,
so we'll
Jack
do the Player of the Year now, yeah.
I was going to say pass
we'll
back
do Player
to
of the Year moment of this season, like we did with the women's team. So first of all, Player of the Year. I'm going to say my Player of the Year is Lewis Stevenson. Simple as that, you know, because as much Chris Cadden deserves it, yes, okay. Lewis Stevenson, you've got to appreciate the magnitude of how good he's been this season, considering how old he is. Well, like for a player like Lewis Stevenson, it would have been easier for him to be like Darren McGregor and just give up and know that this is the end. I think we've still got another season out of Louis. And you've also got to remember, he is now right up there with the top appearances. These are guys like Gordon Smith, Arthur Duncan, that played for us way back when. Louis up there with them. He's dining at that table. And I think he's just been fantastic. Like I said, when we were doing the Tiermaker, every time he's played this season, he's put in a really good shift. And he's changed games. Like I said, Arbroath changed the game. And that hit in hope effort against Rijeka, if that had went in, you know, so for me, yeah, Lewis Stevenson's been absolutely fantastic. He's a testament to putting in hard work and being humble. And for me, he's just Mr. Hibs. Lewis Stevenson's my Player of the Year and deservedly got the Players' Player of the Year as well.
Stevenson's mine as well. I think he's my favourite Hibs player. I think that he's been class this season. Every game he's been brilliant, and he gets it. Like, I know you're hoping after being at the club for so long you get it, but he epitomises what it means to play for Hibs. You see that when we're 2-0 down at Hampden, he's wrestling. I think it was Kingsley, wins the ball back, sets up the goal to get us back in the game. So, for me, Lewis Stevenson by far Player of the Year. Like you say, I hope and think we've got another season and a half, maybe 2 out of him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I agree with that. You know, that semi-final, that's what you want to see. Lewis Stevenson gets Hibs. It's as simple as that. He gets Hibs more than like the so-called Hibs supporter Paul Hanlon, if you ask me. So I'll move on just to finish us up for moment of the season. So I'm still thinking of mine, so I'll let you go first. Apart from it being over, what's your moment of the season, Charlie?
Getting to interview Boozy. I think. Are we talking podcast or are we talking?
Well, we'll do both. We'll do both.
Okay.
So we'll do podcasting on the pitch. So
podcast definitely getting to interview Boozy. He was one of my favourite players growing up, and he probably would still make it into my top 5 Hibs players all time. So I getting to talk to a childhood hero was amazing. And I think moment on the pitch, that's a hard one because there's not been that many to choose from, is there? It's probably going to have to be the 3-1 against Rangers, eh? I think that just what a game to be 3-0 up, win half an hour at Hampden. Doesn't happen that often, regardless of who you're playing. So, and it was even sweeter. It was against those orange men from Glasgow and Belfast and Edinburgh.
Stop yourself there.
And Kirkcaldy and Fife and everywhere else that they come from. So, I think that was probably the highlight of the season.
You forgot to mention the Dumfries and Galloway loyal. They'd be throwing their foots on the floor. No, but I support Queen of the South Egypts. I think for me, my podcast moment of the season is. I think my podcast moment of the season. Obviously, we did it with the women's team. We were talking about the derbies and that. I think my podcast moment of the season, in terms of a men's team, because I was going to say the women's derby and getting invited into hospitality for a second. I thought no, that's obviously my podcast player of the moment. My podcast, excuse me, I lost to have a stroke, ladies and gentlemen. My podcast moment of the season, I was going to be interviewing Ron Gordon. This time 2 years ago, when I was like at my darkest moment in my life, in the middle of lockdown, had a mental breakdown, didn't want to be here, quite frankly. and had a lot of bullying issues as well, to sitting down with two of my best mates interviewing the owner of the club that I support. It's surreal. You know, sitting down and actually getting to speak to Ron Gordon and how open he was as well. It was amazing. And it's an experience I won't forget in a hurry. And it's just a shame we never got to do it in person, because obviously there's still COVID and everything back when we interviewed Ron. But that was amazing. Like I said, it shows how far, like, I think I've come in 2 years now. Far we came as a podcast, you know, me personally, I think you and Calvin would say it for yourselves personally as well. And for us as a group, as a podcast, it shows how far we come, that we were sitting down interviewing Ron. So I've got to say that was amazing. Moment of the season, pitch wise, on the pitch wise, I've got to go for the 3-1 semi-final win against Rangers. Although I've got to say a sneak one that I'll throw in there is Santa Coloma as well, because that was the first game back after lockdown for me. First time back at Easter Road since the 3-1 derby loss to Hearts in 2020. So it was amazing to be back. So I've got to say this season started with that. And yeah, it's overall, I think, off the pitch for us being a brilliant season for us as a podcast. And that brings me on to just what I want to say. We said at the end of the women's one, but I think we'll say it again and reiterate it. Thank you so much, guys, for your support. You know, it's been phenomenal. We wouldn't be here without you. We wouldn't be interviewing. You know, as much as we do a lot of work ourselves, it's you guys listening to us blare a load of shite every Monday night that gets us to where we are. So I'd like to thank us. You know, we've taken a lot of flack. We've had our naysayers, we've had our trolls, but it's you guys that listen and support us that motivate us to keep going. You've got to remember, Calvin started this as a bit of a lockdown project, and me and Charlie just tagged along for the ride, which is that's why I'm a bit sad Calvin couldn't join us today. But you know, we've all developed as people, and we've all developed as a group. We've become very close and good friends. So I think we've got you guys to thank for that. We really do. You guys listen, you guys support us, you guys retweet our stuff. You guys offer your opinions, and sometimes you're a lot smarter than us, I've got to say. And you guys have really contributed effectively, sending in questions for our interviews and everything like that. So we've got to thank you guys. Again, I've got to thank the club. The club have been amazing with us, because to be honest, I wouldn't let us three anywhere near any club officials, especially after some of the stuff we got away with. But I think it's amazing. You know, Adam, I've got to give Adam a shout out right now. Adam, the amount of work he puts in to make sure that we're accommodated, well, because you know, it'd be easy just for the BBC and Sky and all the papers to be pushed to the front, but Adam makes sure that us as podcasters, as fan media, get in there and get space. So I'd like to thank Adam for accommodating us. You know, Adam's been fantastic, so I've got to give Adam a massive shout out there. And again, thank you to the club for being so open with us and letting us get access to these figures and letting us do interviews. And that goes for both the men's and the women's team. I think, you know, we've had incredible access. And yeah, so I've got to say a massive thank you. And my final thank you is to Hibs. Just final thank you to Hibs for putting us through the emotional mango, but being our club and being there. So yeah, Charlie, is there anything you'd like to add to that before we sign off?
No, I think I'm glad the season's over. On the men's side anyway, but looking forward to next season. Aye, we'll go with that.
It's an amount of trepidation, to be honest.
Aye, once the League Cup's at the end, then we'll be fine.
Yeah, spot on. So yeah, guys, that concludes our men's season review. As always, we'd love for you to get involved in the discussion. The men's season review got very well received, so we'd like to see the same on this as well. And we'll be back soonish. We've got a few interviews in the pipeline, a few behind the scenes, and we've got some other exciting things getting organised. And then we'll be back to sort of start previewing next season as well, which is scary stuff. It's rolling around quick. It's like, yeah, I don't think I'm ready for it. Like I said, there's a certain amount of trepidation. But yeah, guys, thank you for listening. And as always, glory to the Hibs.